What would you do if you saved the life of a billionaire and be offered a life-changing opportunity in return? Olivia Bennet, an ordinary nurse, faces an unimaginable decision when her act of kindness leads to a world of power, secrets, and danger. Is it really a second chance, or is there something more sinister at play? Watch the story unfold, only here on H2 Black Thread. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more. Olivia Bennet had worked as a nurse at Westwood Medical Center for over 6 years. She had built her career on dedication, always willing to work long shifts, stay late during emergencies, and help her colleagues when they were stretched thin. She was the kind of nurse who put her heart into everything she did, often sacrificing her own well-being for the sake of her patients. But today, all that hard work felt meaningless. It started with a call into her supervisor's office. Karen, her supervisor, was the kind of leader Olivia respected. She'd always been supportive and had a way of making sure everyone on the floor felt appreciated. So when Karen sat her down with a serious look on her face, Olivia's gut instinct told her something was wrong. "Olivia, I have some unfortunate news," Karen said, her voice softer than usual. "Due to budget cuts, we're having to eliminate some positions. Yours is one of them." The words hit Olivia like a punch to the gut. Fired. After everything she had given, 6 years of hard work, long nights, and overtime shifts, she was being let go. Karen's voice continued, but Olivia barely heard the words. All she could focus on was the overwhelming sense of betrayal. "But I've been here for so long," Olivia said, fighting to keep the tremble out of her voice. "I've worked weekends, holidays. I've helped in every department. How could this happen?" Karen sighed, her face apologetic but resigned. "I know, and we appreciate all you've done. But the hospital has to make tough decisions, and this is the reality of the situation. I'm really sorry." Olivia felt a lump in her throat, but she held back the tears. Instead, she nodded slowly, as though processing what Karen had just said. She stood up, walked out of the office, and headed to her locker, trying to wrap her mind around what had just happened. Her emotions felt like a whirlwind: disbelief, anger, and confusion. How was it fair that after everything she'd given, she was being thrown away like this? She didn't linger. As soon as she had packed up her things, she left the hospital, stepping out into the cool Chicago air. But it wasn't refreshing. It felt suffocating. She had no idea what she was supposed to do now. The reality of her situation was crashing down on her: no job, no income, and bills piling up faster than she could count. She wandered aimlessly through the streets of downtown Chicago, the usual hustle and bustle of the city feeling strangely distant. The weight of her thoughts made her feel small, insignificant. Her mind was racing with worry. How would she pay her rent? What was she supposed to tell her family? She couldn't even think straight, her chest tightening with the pressure of the uncertainty ahead. It wasn't just the loss of her job. It was the sudden halt in everything she had worked toward. She had been so focused on her career, so immersed in her role as a nurse, that now, without it, she felt lost. The streets seemed colder than usual, the noise of the city louder. It was as if everything was moving forward while she was stuck, unable to catch up. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, but she didn't have the energy to check it. It was probably another reminder of her mounting bills. Her rent was due in a week, and with no job, she had no idea how she was going to make ends meet. After a while, Olivia found herself outside her apartment building, her legs aching from walking aimlessly through the city. She glanced up at the towering structure, the reality of her situation weighing heavily on her. She was tired, physically, emotionally, and mentally. But she knew there was no time to rest. The bills wouldn't wait. The rent wouldn't wait. She needed to find a new job fast, but the thought of diving back into the job market made her stomach churn. The competition in a big city like Chicago was fierce, and she wasn't sure where to even begin. When she stepped into her apartment, the familiar scent of her place did little to comfort her. The apartment that used to feel like home now felt like a reminder of everything that was slipping through her fingers. She dropped her bag by the door and walked into the kitchen, where a stack of unpaid bills waited for her on the counter. The rent notice, credit card bills, a notice from her student loan provider. Everything felt overwhelming. She sat down at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the bills in front of her. Her mind kept flashing back to the conversation with Karen. How could this happen? How could she have been so easily discarded after everything she had sacrificed? She wiped her face, feeling the weight of her frustration and helplessness. It wasn't supposed to be like this. She had always imagined that she would continue growing in her career, moving up, making more of an impact. But now, it felt like all of her efforts had been in vain. The phone buzzed again, pulling her out of her thoughts. This time she checked it. It was a message from her best friend, Sarah, checking in to see how she was doing. Olivia couldn't bring herself to reply. What could she say? "Hey, I just lost my job and now I have no idea what to do with my life." It sounded pathetic, even to her own ears. She tossed her phone onto the table, feeling the tears welling up again. It wasn't fair. She had given everything to this job and now it was gone, just like that. She couldn't escape the crushing feeling of defeat. But just as she was about to give in to the weight of her emotions, the doorbell rang. She wiped her face quickly, hoping it wasn't another collection notice or someone looking to sell her something. When she opened the door, a delivery man stood there holding a small, neatly wrapped package. "Is this for Olivia Bennett?" he asked, handing her the package. She took it with a confused frown. She hadn't ordered anything. She glanced at the return address but didn't recognize it. She opened the package carefully, finding a small envelope inside. There was a simple note. "We heard about your situation. We may have something that could help." No name, no details, just a phone number to call. Olivia stared at the note, puzzled. Who would be sending her something like this? Was it some kind of scam? She didn't know, but she felt an odd sense of curiosity. What did she have to lose? Her whole world was crumbling around her and maybe, just maybe, this was a sign. She grabbed her phone and dialed the number, not knowing that this call would set in motion a chain of events that would change her life in ways she could never imagine. It was one of those nights in downtown Chicago when the streets were quieter than usual, the usual hum of cars and chatter softened by the crisp autumn air. Olivia Bennett had left her apartment earlier that evening, trying to clear her head, trying to forget the crushing reality of her job loss. She walked aimlessly through the streets, trying to convince herself that things would get better, that she would find a way to move forward. But the weight of the past few days hung heavy on her shoulders. The city was still alive around her. Lights flickered from the storefronts. A few late-night patrons sipped coffee at a nearby cafe, but for Olivia, everything felt distant. She couldn't shake the feeling that her life had been paused, stuck in limbo after the shocking news from her job. As she walked, lost in thought, she suddenly heard a loud noise, a thud followed by a muffled crash. Olivia's head snapped in the direction of the sound. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw a middle-aged man collapse just in front of a sleek, black luxury car. His body hit the sidewalk with a sickening thud, and the sound echoed through the otherwise quiet street. A small crowd quickly gathered around him, but no one seemed to know what to do. People stood there, staring, some muttering quietly, others pulling out their phones, as if unsure whether to call for help or just watch. The man lay motionless, his face pale under the glow of the streetlights. Instinct kicked in. Olivia's training, her years as a nurse, took over. She didn't even think twice before pushing through the crowd. In the past, she would have hesitated, but tonight was different. Tonight, she didn't have time to question her actions. Every second counted. She knelt beside the man, her hands shaking slightly as she checked for a pulse. It was weak. His skin felt cold, clammy, and his breath came in short, shallow gasps. The signs were unmistakable cardiac arrest. Without wasting a moment, Olivia positioned herself beside him, her mind already running through the steps she'd memorized over the years. She placed her hands firmly on his chest and began pressing down in rhythm, counting in her head as she performed the CPR she had done countless times before. 1, 2, 3. She pressed down harder, trying to make every compression count. The crowd watched in stunned silence. A few people whispered nervously to each other, but no one stepped forward to help. Olivia didn't care. Her only focus was the man in front of her, the rhythm of her hands matching the rhythm of her heart, her breath steady, though the adrenaline coursed through her veins. The cold autumn air bit at her skin, but she barely noticed. The world around her was a blur. All she could focus on was saving this man. Minutes felt like hours, every second dragging as Olivia fought against time. 1, 2, 3, her hands pressed against his chest again, harder this time. She could feel her muscles aching, but she couldn't stop. She couldn't let him slip away. She couldn't leave this man to die on the cold sidewalk while people just stood by and watched. Her mind raced through the procedures she'd learned, the steps she had drilled into her brain for years. Keep going, Olivia. Don't stop. Her hands moved, each push more determined than the last. The silence of the crowd was broken only by the sound of her steady breaths and the desperate, rhythmic thuds of her compressions. After what felt like an eternity, something shifted. The man's body jerked and Olivia felt it. His chest rose sharply, a sudden, sharp gasp of air filling his lungs. His eyes fluttered open, and for a moment, everything stopped. Olivia's heart raced, and she let out a breath she hadn't even realized she was holding. The man was breathing again. He was alive. The crowd around her erupted into murmurs of relief, but Olivia didn't stay to bask in the praise. She didn't wait for someone to pat her on the back or thank her. She had done her job. She had saved a life. But that was all she needed. It wasn't about recognition or praise, it was about doing what needed to be done. As she stood up and stepped back from the man, she noticed the paramedics rushing toward her, their sirens wailing in the distance. They'd be there soon enough. Her work was done. The man had made it through the worst of it, and the professionals would take over from here. She didn't need to be a part of the aftercare. She didn't need the accolades or the attention. Olivia simply turned and began walking away from the crowd, feeling the weight of the moment settle into her chest. She didn't stop to see if anyone would recognize her or thank her. She just walked, her heart still racing but a little lighter than before. Her steps were quick, almost desperate, as if she were running from the emotions that threatened to catch up with her. She wanted to get away, to process what had just happened, to feel like she was still in control of something, anything, after everything she had lost. But as she walked down the street, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The world had just changed for her, and she didn't know what that meant yet. She hadn't just saved a man's life tonight. She had done something she wasn't sure she could ever explain, something that felt more significant than just performing a medical procedure. There was a connection, an undeniable force in those moments, and Olivia knew she would never forget them. As she turned the corner, heading back toward her apartment, Olivia tried to push the thought from her mind. She had no time to dwell on it. She had to face the reality of her situation. She was unemployed, struggling to make ends meet. But for a brief moment, as she walked alone through the empty streets, she felt something stir inside her. It was a feeling of purpose, something that had been missing for too long. She didn't realize it yet, but this one act, this one moment of saving a life was about to change everything for Olivia Bennett. It was the beginning of a new chapter she hadn't even begun to imagine. The sunlight streamed through the small window of Olivia's apartment the next morning, but it barely made a dent in her dark mood. The weight of her situation hadn't lifted. If anything, it had grown heavier overnight. The bills were still piled up on the kitchen table, and the looming threat of eviction hung over her like a dark cloud. With no job, no backup plan, and no idea what to do next, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that she was sinking. She shuffled into the kitchen, poured herself a cup of coffee, though she wasn't sure if she was drinking it out of habit or desperation, and sat down at the small table by the window. Her phone, resting next to the stack of bills, buzzed suddenly, breaking her train of thought. She glanced at the screen. The number was unfamiliar. A part of her wanted to ignore it. After all, what could anyone possibly want with her? But she felt an odd tug in her gut, an instinct telling her to answer. "Hello," she said, her voice rough from the lack of sleep. The voice on the other end was deep, calm, and confident, a stark contrast to the anxiety that had been gnawing at Olivia's inside since the day before. "Is this Olivia Bennett?" the voice asked. "Yes, speaking," she replied, her curiosity piqued. "Who is this?" "My name is Alexander Carter," he said. "I'm the son of the man you saved last night." Olivia's breath hitched in her chest. Her heart skipped a beat. She was still processing the events from the night before, but hearing someone mention the man she had helped so suddenly, it felt surreal. She hadn't expected anyone to reach out to her. After all, she had just done her job. "Wait, the man on the sidewalk?" Olivia asked, her mind rushing back to the scene, to the moment she had leaned over him, pressing down on his chest to keep him alive. "Yes, my father," Alexander confirmed. "I can't begin to thank you enough for what you did. He owes you his life." Olivia shook her head even though he couldn't see her. I didn't do anything special. I just acted. Anyone would have done the same." Alexander chuckled softly. "Not everyone, Olivia, trust me. That's why I'm calling. My father wants to meet you, and so do I. He insists on showing his gratitude." Olivia's stomach dropped. She had no idea what this meant. "I didn't save your father for anything in return," she said quickly, still trying to process the situation. "I don't need, please," Alexander interrupted, his voice firm but not unkind. "This isn't about charity. It's about gratitude. We owe you more than words can express. My father is the chairman of Carter Industries, and he wants to thank you personally." There was a brief pause, and then he added, "We've arranged a meeting for later today, at a restaurant in downtown." Olivia was taken aback. Carter Industries. She had heard of it, of course. It was one of the largest financial conglomerates in the country, a name that echoed in boardrooms and news outlets alike. She had never imagined herself crossing paths with someone so influential, let alone having their son reach out to her. She hesitated. "I'm not sure." "I promise you, Olivia, it'll only take a few minutes of your time," Alexander said, his tone almost persuasive. "It's the least we can do, and I think you'll find it worth your while." Her mind was racing. Was this some kind of scam? But something about his voice felt sincere. She had saved the life of a powerful man. What could he want in return? Finally, after a long pause, Olivia sighed. What did she have to lose? "Okay," she said. "I'll come." The meeting was set for later that afternoon. Olivia, still unsure of what to expect, slipped on a pair of jeans and a blouse that she had always considered her best, but still far from what she felt would be suitable for a fancy lunch with a billionaire. Her nerves kicked in as she looked at herself in the mirror, feeling out of place. She caught a taxi to the restaurant, La Masque, a luxurious spot tucked away in the heart of downtown. It was one of those places that she had passed by countless times but never dared to enter. The kind of place where the chandeliers sparkled and the menu prices were likely to make her stomach turn. When she arrived, the doorman opened the door with a polite smile and a nod, letting her enter. She was led past tables where well-dressed couples and businesspeople enjoyed their meals, and soon, Olivia found herself standing in front of a private corner table. At the table sat a man she recognized from the night before, William Carter, his silver hair neatly combed and his suit impeccable, giving off an air of quiet power. Standing beside him was his son, Alexander, looking every bit the confident, well-dressed businessman. "Miss Bennet, thank you for joining us," William Carter said, his voice deep, carrying the weight of authority. He stood up to greet her, his hand extended. Olivia shook it, her own hand feeling small in his firm grip. "Please sit," William said, gesturing to the chair across from him. As Olivia sat down, her heart raced. What did they want from her? Why was this meeting happening? She had just done what any nurse would have done. She wasn't expecting anything in return. "I can't tell you how grateful we are for what you did last night," William continued, his eyes studying her with a calculating yet appreciative gaze. "You saved my life, Olivia. For that, I owe you everything." Before Olivia could protest, Alexander spoke up. "That's why we wanted to meet with you. We don't just want to say thank you with words. We want to show you our gratitude." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope, placing it in front of Olivia. "This is just a small token of our appreciation," he said. Olivia's eyes widened as she pulled the envelope toward her. She opened it carefully, revealing a check for $500,000. Her heart skipped a beat. This was more money than she had ever seen in her life. She couldn't take it. She hadn't saved William Carter for money. It wasn't about the reward. "No," she said quickly, pushing the check back toward them. "I didn't save him for this. I can't accept it." Alexander smiled, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "I understand your hesitation, but this is just the beginning." Before Olivia could respond, Alexander slid a sleek black card across the table. "Take this," he said, his voice lowering slightly. "It's an invitation to meet my father tomorrow morning at Carter Tower. He'd like to speak with you personally. We think you could be a valuable asset to us." Olivia's mind was spinning. She had no idea what this all meant, but one thing was clear: her life was about to change in ways she couldn't have imagined. "Meet him," Olivia repeated, still reeling from the whirlwind of the conversation. "What for?" "Just trust us," Alexander said, his tone serious now. "We'll explain everything tomorrow." Olivia glanced at the card in front of her. Carter Tower. The name alone was enough to make her heart race. What had she gotten herself into? But as she looked up at William and Alexander, she realized one thing: this was only the beginning. The towering Carter Tower loomed ahead, its sleek, glass exterior reflecting the morning sun as Olivia approached. As she stood at the base of the building, staring up at the impressive structure, she felt a mix of awe and uncertainty. She had heard of Carter Tower before, of course. It was one of the most iconic buildings in Chicago, home to Carter Industries, a financial empire that spanned across multiple industries. People like her didn't just walk into places like this. And yet, here she was, about to meet the man whose life she had saved the night before. Olivia's nerves were on edge as she made her way through the lobby. The reception area was pristine, with polished marble floors and towering columns, exuding an air of wealth and power. The walls were lined with expensive art, and the lighting was warm, yet striking, creating a luxurious ambience. She couldn't help but feel out of place. The stark contrast between her simple attire and the surroundings made her self-conscious. She had dressed as best she could, but she still felt underdressed for such an opulent setting. A receptionist greeted her with a polite smile, her voice smooth as she announced Olivia's arrival. "Miss Bennet, Mr. Carter is expecting you. Please follow me." Olivia followed the receptionist through a set of double doors and into a private elevator that whisked her up to the top floor. The elevator ride felt endless, the tension in her chest building with every passing second. What was this meeting really about? Why had William Carter, the CEO of Carter Industries, wanted to meet with her after she had simply done her job. She didn't know what to expect, but deep down, she knew this meeting would change her life. When the elevator doors opened, Olivia was led into a spacious office with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a stunning view of Chicago's skyline. The room itself was immaculate: sleek, modern furniture, large bookshelves filled with books and awards, and soft lighting that created an air of sophistication. At the center of the room sat William Carter, the man she had saved, his silver hair perfectly combed, his suit dark and sharp, exuding authority and wealth. He looked up as Olivia entered, his sharp gaze locking onto her as though he were assessing her every move. There was no warmth in his eyes, but rather an intensity that seemed to strip away any pretense. He stood to greet her, extending a hand, his grip firm and confident. "Olivia, thank you for coming," William said, his voice deep, commanding, but not unkind. "I owe you more than just my life. You've made me see what truly matters." Olivia shook his hand, her nerves jangling with the weight of his words. She had saved him, yes, but it felt odd to be here in his world with him looking at her like that. His presence was overwhelming, and she struggled to mask the unease creeping up inside her. I just did what anyone would have done," Olivia said, her voice a little shakier than she intended. "It's nothing special." William nodded, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Not everyone would have done what you did, Olivia. Trust me, most people would have walked away. You didn't. You acted without hesitation, and that means something." Olivia stood in front of him, unsure of how to respond. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, especially not from someone like him. She wasn't here for praise, she was here because he had asked to meet. She had no idea what he wanted from her. Was this just gratitude, or was there something else at play? William gestured to a chair across from his desk, and Olivia sat down, her hands folded in her lap, trying to steady her breathing. "I won't waste your time," William said as he settled back into his own chair, his eyes never leaving hers. "I've given this a lot of thought, and I believe you can help me in ways you might not even realize." Olivia felt a flutter of confusion in her stomach. "Help you? With what?" William leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense. "I'm offering you a position, Olivia. A position unlike anything you've ever had before." Her heart skipped a beat and she blinked, trying to process his words. She hadn't expected anything like this. "A position," she repeated. "What kind of position?" William's smile deepened, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was calculating, almost as if he had been waiting for her to ask. "I want you to be my personal medical advisor," he said, his voice steady but full of weight. "I've been dealing with some health concerns that I need to manage, and I need someone I can trust, someone with your skills. I can offer you a salary 3 times higher than your previous one, a residence at the Carter Mansion, and all your living expenses covered." Olivia sat frozen, the offer hanging in the air between them like a heavy weight. She had never imagined anything like this. She had never dreamed of stepping into a world like this one, of living in a mansion, working for a billionaire. It sounded too good to be true. Her heart pounded in her chest as she tried to process what he was offering. I don't know what to say," Olivia stammered, trying to steady herself. This is a lot." William leaned back in his chair, his gaze unwavering. "I'm not asking you to decide right now, Olivia. Take your time. But trust me, this is an opportunity you won't want to miss. You have the chance to be part of something bigger than yourself, to make a difference. And as my personal medical advisor, you'll have access to resources, opportunities, and a life you've never imagined." Olivia was silent, her mind racing. She had lost everything: her job, her stability, and now here was a man offering her a chance at everything she had ever dreamed of. A new life. A fresh start. It was tempting, so incredibly tempting. But something inside her hesitated. There was something about this whole situation that felt off. William's smile widened slightly as if he could read her thoughts. "I know this is overwhelming," he said softly. "Take your time, but know that the offer will still be here when you're ready to accept it." Olivia looked at the man sitting across from her. He was offering her a life she had never even dared to dream of. But she had to be careful. People didn't get to where William Carter was by being ordinary. There had to be more to this than just a job offer. As she sat there, the weight of the decision pressing on her, she realized that this meeting was more than just a job offer. It was the beginning of something much larger. And whether she was ready for it or not, her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. That night, Olivia lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her small apartment, the weight of her decision pressing down on her chest like an anchor. The darkness of her room mirrored the confusion swirling in her mind. Everything had changed. Just a day ago, she was struggling with the aftermath of losing her job, questioning her future. Now, she had an offer, a life-altering opportunity to work for one of the wealthiest men in the country. The numbers alone were enough to make her head spin. 3 times the salary, a mansion to live in, and all her expenses covered. It sounded too good to be true. But there was something else, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. Something about William Carter's offer felt too perfect, too calculated. She kept replaying the conversation in her mind over and over again. "You didn't just save my life, Olivia. You made me see what truly matters." He had said that with such sincerity, but did he really mean it? Or was it part of a larger game she hadn't been invited to understand yet? What did he really want from her? Olivia had always been the kind of person who relied on her instincts. She had been a nurse because she felt a deep calling to help people. But right now, something about this job offer felt wrong. There were too many unknowns, too many things William hadn't said. And even though he had promised that she could think it over, there was a part of her that worried about what accepting his offer might mean, what might be expected of her in return. She turned over in bed, pulling the covers tighter around her shoulders. The money, the prestige, it was all tempting. But at what cost? The next morning, Olivia woke with a new sense of resolve. The uncertainty that had kept her up all night still gnawed at her, but she couldn't ignore the pull of the opportunity in front of her. She had nothing left to lose. She had been given a chance, a lifeline in a world that had felt like it was slipping away from her. Still, she needed answers. She couldn't just walk into this world blindly. No matter how much she wanted to believe that this was the fresh start she needed, she couldn't ignore the gut feeling that something wasn't quite right. She got dressed in her best clothes, a simple blouse and black skirt, not quite fitting the standard for such a high-end office, but it would have to do. She could feel the weight of the black card in her pocket, Carter Tower, calling to her like a beacon. She needed to get to the bottom of this. As she stepped into the elevator at Carter Tower later that morning, her nerves were on edge. Her heart raced with each floor the elevator passed. She was about to walk into a world she had only ever seen from a distance, a world of power, wealth, and influence. But now, it was her world to step into, and she didn't know if she was ready. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped out onto the top floor, where she was greeted by the same receptionist who had shown her to the office the day before. She followed him down the hall, past walls lined with artwork, past assistants and high-powered businesspeople on their phones, all seeming to have somewhere important to be. And yet, Olivia felt small, insignificant, like a visitor in a world that was not her own. At the end of the hallway, she was led into William Carter's office. He was already standing by the window, looking out over the city, his posture perfect, exuding power and control. "Good morning, Olivia," William said without turning around. "I'm glad you've come to a decision." Olivia stood in the doorway, her heart pounding as she hesitated. "I've thought about it, Mr. Carter," she said, trying to sound confident. I'm willing to accept your offer, but I need to understand exactly what I'm stepping into. This is a big commitment, and I want to be sure. William turned slowly, his gaze steady, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. Of course, Olivia. I wouldn't want you to jump into something you're not ready for. He gestured to the chair in front of his desk. Please sit. Olivia sat down, still feeling a little out of place in the opulent office. It was hard not to feel like an outsider in a room like this. Everything was so perfect, so polished, like it was all designed to make you feel small. But she wasn't here to feel small. She was here to get answers. I appreciate the opportunity, Olivia began, trying to steady her voice. But I need to know more. Why me? I'm just a nurse. I don't know what your expectations are, and frankly, I'm not sure I understand why you'd offer me this position. William leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him as he considered her words. It's simple, really. You've proven that you're someone who doesn't back down when things get tough. You showed that last night when you didn't hesitate to save my life. People like you, Olivia, they don't come along often. I need someone who isn't afraid to act when the time comes. Olivia listened, her instincts still warning her to tread carefully. But this position, it's not just about medical care, is it? There's more to it than that. I can feel it. William's expression softened just slightly before he gave a small nod. You're right. This isn't just about medical care. I need someone I can trust, someone who can look out for me in ways others can't, someone who won't ask too many questions. Olivia shivered at his words. There was something unsettling about the way he said it, someone who won't ask too many questions. Questions about what? Olivia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. William didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled knowingly. You'll understand in time. For now, know this, you'll be compensated well and your living expenses will be taken care of. But in return, you'll have access to the world of Carter Industries, power, influence, resources, the kind of things you've never imagined, but all of that comes with its own set of rules. Olivia's heart raced. She had known there would be strings attached, but she hadn't expected them to feel so heavy. You don't need to decide right now, William continued, his tone calm and almost coaxing. Take your time. But trust me, Olivia, this is an opportunity you won't want to miss. The room felt suffocating, and for a moment, Olivia was unsure if she was ready for what was being offered. But as she looked into William's eyes, she realized that this wasn't just about a job. This was about entering a world where power, secrets, and danger could collide. The decision she had to make was not just about whether she wanted the job. It was about what kind of life she was willing to accept, and how far she was willing to go to hold on to it. As Olivia sat there, she realized that stepping into this world was not going to be easy. The rules were unclear, and the stakes were higher than anything she had ever dealt with before. She was on the edge of something big, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Her life was about to change in ways she couldn't even begin to comprehend.